that. We are live. Welcome, one and all. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are around the world. We are back. Puro Sabor Virtual 2021 is back. It's our fourth episode. And today we're going to dig deep. Today we have a truly exciting special feature waiting for you all. Joining us today are two exceptional gentlemen of the Leaf. And together with them, we will be exploring the world, the art of tasting and blending tobaccos and the finest cigars that are out there. I'm blessed and honored to welcome NicholasPerdomo III and Mr. Willy Herrera here today for the fourth show of Puro Sabor. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here with us. Thanks for taking the time, and welcome to the Light 'em Up Lounge, and welcome to Puro Sabor.
Thank you. Good to be here, man.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And of course, as always, the man, the myth, the legend, straight from Dubai, our dear friend, our brother, and the host of the show, Riot from the Leaf Masters. Right, I know it's terribly late over there, or should I much rather say it's early over there, but thank you so much for being here with us, and welcome to today's show.
Not at all. Always a pleasure. Thank you for the kind words, and to be in the presence of our two distinguished guests and yourself, Reinhard, is an absolute honor, and obviously our dear attendees and guests. This is going to be a serious session. There's going to be a lot of hard lifting happening, and I can't wait for us to start.
Well, let's dive right in because we have quite a lot to cover today, and I expect nothing but an epic show and conversation, because when we talk about the sensory nuances, all the incredible details and fascinating components in tasting raw materials, individual tobaccos, as well as all these raw materials rolled and assembled into tiny little Puro cigars, all the way to blending and tasting, sort of the finishing steps before a true all-time classic cigar comes to life. And we want to talk about that artistry, about the craftsmanship of blending and tasting, and who better to do so than Willy Herrera and NicholasPerdomo, who both have an exceptional track record, both individually and with their family legacy in the cigar industry. And so at the very beginning, I would love to just hear a little bit about your two approaches, as similar or different as they might be, because you both come from individual and different backgrounds, how you actually got into the world of cigars, and also in particular, what exactly that, the magic of the tasting component of the blending means to you today.
Sure. Nick, you want to go first, or you want me to jump in?
However you want. I'm good. I can go if you want to go first. No problem.
Okay, I'll jump in. So, my story is a little different in a sense from a lot of the blenders, master blenders, people that are involved in factories. I started off basically as a smoker. I have been a smoker since a very young age, 15, 16 years old, something like that. I remember going to my aunt's house, and her husband always had a cigar in his mouth. And that guy probably went to sleep with a cigar in his mouth. And I was always fascinated by that aroma in the house. And, I wanted to be like him. I wanted to have that cigar, and I wanted to smell that smell around me all the time. And so for those of you who have met me, I've always been a little larger than what I actually was by age. So at 15 or 16, I would take off on my bike from my house and go to our little, what we call our bodega, down the street. And I would buy, they would sell you the the loaf of the dough before they put it in the oven to make the Cuban bread. And that's what we would fish all the canals around the house or whatnot. And then they had in the counter of the cafeteria there, these what we call fumas, short filler cigars, 25 cents, 35 cents, depending on the cigar. Some went up to like 50 cents. And so I would grab two of those cigars, whatever they had on the counter, and that's what I would have in my mouth, fishing up and down the canals and whatnot as a kid. And I just fell in love with that. I like the flavor. I like the aroma of it. I loved everything about it. So now you fast forward to now I'm an adult. I'm buying, obviously not fumas now. I'm buying more premium stuff at cigar shops. And my wife's family had started a very small cigar factory here in Miami in Little Havana. And it was being ran by my wife's mom, her grandmother, and the grandfather. And that was it. It was just them, and we had two rollers, and we had the two blends that they had come up with. My wife's grandfather gets sick. They needed a male in the factory because back then, late 90s, early 2000s, Little Havana wasn't what it is today. It was a little bit more dangerous. You needed to have someone there to help you close up the shop at 5:30, 6 o'clock, so you wouldn't be by yourself. So at that point, I was in banking. I have been in banking probably around 6.5, 7 years, something around there. And I remember the old man was sick. They needed somebody there. I'm like, okay, I'll take a week off vacation. So I took a week off from work, and I worked a full week there in the factory. So now I go from, dealing with angry people all the time, people having problems all the time with their checks, or, why is there a hold on the deposit, or why was this return? It was always a problem in banking. And now I went to these, having great conversations with people all the time in the factory and smoking a cigar all day long. And I mean, it was just a different world. And I'm like, man, this is cool. I like this. Not only do I love smoking cigars, but the people you're dealing with, you're having pleasant conversations. People are happy. People aren't pissed off when they come in to see you all the time. And so I put in my 2 weeks and I quit the bank and I started full-time working with them in the factory. Now, like I said, I knew nothing of tobacco. I knew nothing about cigars other than what I like to smoke and the reasons why I like to smoke certain cigars. And so when I started working there, I knew I didn't like the cigars we were making. They weren't hitting my palate right. So I was smoking, stuff that I would buy, stuff that I was enjoying. And anybody who knows, any older Cuban gentlemen, and Nick, I'm sure you could concur with me, they're very prideful of what they have, especially what they make. And so it kind of became an issue for I call him my grandfather because my wife and I have been together like 32 years now at this point. Why are you smoking this? And why aren't you smoking our cigars? And you're spending all this money, so on and so forth. So I said, well, I got to figure out and have a cigar made here that I do like, that does hit my palate right. So I would go into our tobacco room and just grab stuff purely based off how it smelled, and then bring that to the rollers and say, hey, just put this together, make me a cigar using this, and this. And that's kind of how I started in a sense, because I was kind of going by smell. A lot that goes into blending, it's by texture of the tobacco, by the smell of the tobacco, and then other components go into that, but a lot goes by smell and texture. And so that went on for a few weeks until it became a problem for the rollers, because the rollers get paid by how many cigars they make. And now here I am constantly giving them stuff to make for me outside of what we call it tarea, what their amount of cigars they need to make every day. So that became a problem. So my last resort was, I need to learn how to make a cigar. I need to make and work, with these tobaccos and create something so I could try it without bothering anybody to make the cigars for me. So that's what I did. I basically taught myself by staring at them and looking at them, how they created that bunch, how they filled those molds, how that binder was positioned on the table, so on and so forth, all the different parts. And I learned how to make a cigar. And so, then it was just a game for me. Just let's get this tobacco, let's get this binder, let's do this, let's do that, let's put this amount of seco, this amount of iso, so on and so forth. And I just started making cigars and started, I guess in a sense, I was blending cigars without knowing anything really other than what the smell was or what those particular few tobaccos we had tasted like. And, because we're in Little Havana, we had a lot of foot traffic always coming through Little Havana, because at the time there was a lot of cigar factories. And so we would have, these buses that would stop, and then like on 15th Avenue, our factory is on 11th Avenue. And, people would walk up and down 8th Street, visiting all these cigar factories, visiting all these shops, and they would eventually end up in our place. And, you had your big chunk of those guys. Oh, I'm looking for a cigar for my boss, or I'm looking for a cigar for my dad. But you also had a lot of people asking specific questions. What's the wrapper binder? Oh, where's the filler from? And then those people, that was a flag for me. I'm like, okay, this guy knows. Or this lady knows, because there was a lot of women coming in buying cigars as well. And so those people at the end of the sale became my guinea pigs. And before they left out the door, I say, hold on, let me give you something. I'm going to give it to you for free. All I ask is for you to call me or send me an email and let me know what you think of the cigar. And those were really the people that were giving me feedback on all this stuff I was putting together, because I knew I liked it, but I didn't know what people thought of it. And so I started giving all these people that would come in all this stuff that I was working on in the factory. And like I said, every day was 2, 3, 4 different blends, and just putting stuff in the top shelf, and just see what it tasted like. See how it was, how it burned, what was the aroma, how was the complexity, was it strong, was it mild, and all these different aspects that go into a cigar. And that's pretty much how it started for me. Like I say all the time, it was, out of necessity. For me, it was out of necessity to learn how to make this, because what we came up with is, what we sold, and it's how we lived. It was a very small factory, still very small factory. We don't have 2 people anymore. We got about 10 rollers now, but still, by all accounts, it's a very small operation. And, that's pretty much how it started for me, in a nutshell.
Nicholas, your background obviously is slightly different, because you didn't just venture into cigars after a plethora of other experiences and carving your path in various industries, but you were truly born into cigar dynasty with the Perdomo background and family name to it. How does that, in retrospect, feel to you? And how would you say it was sort of a different entryway into the world of cigars, and how you got started?
It's all I've ever known my whole life. I remember growing up, my dad started the company the same year I was born, in 1992. I grew up in our factory. I remember my dad, we had a facility, or 2 facilities in West Flagler Street, 71st Avenue in Miami. And 1996, we moved to Esteli, Nicaragua. My grandfather, he found our factory, one of the first factory in Esteli. And, growing up as a kid, I always wanted to be like my 2 favorite men, my dad and my grandfather. So they always had a cigar in their mouth. And for me, I was a curious kid, and I wanted to be just like them, and I wanted to know what it was, because they always had cigars. There were always cigars around, so I always wanted to smoke cigars. And as a kid, I was famous for taking a couple of cigars off people's rolling tables. And but I wanted to walk around. I wanted to be just like my dad. I just wanted to be just like my grandfather. And I've been very blessed. It's all I know. I remember as a kid, my parents said, "Hey, do you want to go to summer camp, or do you want to go to the factory in Nicaragua?" I said, "I want to go to the factory in Nicaragua." I was a little bit different as a kid. I wanted to be with my family. And I've had some amazing experiences learning from some of the best people in our industry. blending. I always tell everybody when it comes to tasting cigars, especially, taste is totally subjective. For me and my family, we love tobaccos from Nicaragua, but there's great tobaccos from Dominican Republic, there's great tobaccos from Honduras, and at the end of the day, just taste. It's all your opinion, and for me, it's our tobaccos, our favorite tobaccos from Nicaragua, and we have some really incredible materials, and I've been blessed to be a part of this company really my whole life. So like kind of how you said, I grew up in it. I was born into this business, and I've been loving every second of it. That's a fact.
That's thank you for this, and I love the difference in the background and the experience both of you gentlemen have, and one interesting interview I saw, which I thought was very interesting, is an interview that you had with your father. I was actually watching that a couple of days back, and I think it's very challenging, and it gives a sense of endearment to be interviewed by your own father. I think that's the epitome of the family business. My question to you, obviously being born in the business, and I have the same question to Willy at a later stage, but with a different twist, is who are the people that were key to your knowledge and to your education? Who are the people? Obviously, your father and your grandfather were definitely key to your knowledge. But in that interview, you mentioned a couple of names that you believe were pivotal in the level of knowledge that you got to accomplish or to put together, and how it reflected on you as a person in the cigar business. Would you mind sharing some details about that with us?
Sure. So the two people I mentioned, it was Aristides Garcia and a lady by the name of Sarah Gonzalez. So Aristides Garcia, he's the head of our pre-industry. So he oversees sorting, selecting of tobaccos, and he also oversees our fermentation department. So Aristides, he has over 60 years of experience. His father grew tobacco in Cuba, and he's been working since he was 10 years old in the tobacco industry. So my father, he put me together with him at a young age. I probably started working with Aristides when I was probably about 11, 12 years old. Also because I had a lot of interest and I wanted to work with him because of his knowledge and his experience. But, Aristides taught me so many important things, especially, tobaccos, they all have different textures. So when you ferment tobacco, each different type of leaf, you ferment differently. So depending on the texture and so forth. And, Aristides taught me really important things, how, when you have tobaccos, for example, pilons, it's so important, your eyes, looking at the colors, watching those colors, the evolution of how they change those colors, when they're fermenting in those piles and those pilones, using your eyes, to see those colors, feeling the textures, your fingers, how to use your hands, how to feel that tobacco, as it goes almost from powdery to a little bit more of a smooth texture, a little bit more elastic, it's more pliable. And then, also taking those tobaccos and, right before they're almost fully fermented, we make samples out of those cigars to see and predict how those tobaccos are going to burn, the combustibility, things like that. So he taught me a lot, and he also taught me how to turn pilons. I remember when I was a kid, he said, "Hey, it's your turn." I was 13 years old, and I remember I took off my T-shirt, and I'm working with our guys in Nicaragua, and I'm helping. We're taking all the tobacco from the top, putting it on the bottom, everything on the bottom, putting it on top, and the sides and everything. So we're changing. He had me a part of that process. And working with those tobaccos, turning it kind of like, his interpretation. Basically, he taught me it's like cooking barbecue. When you ferment tobacco, it's low and slow. The tobacco will always tell you when it's ready. You have to watch. It's like a baby almost. You have to really watch those tobaccos. So I've been very blessed to learn from a master like him. And then on the factory end, I learned from Sarah Gonzalez. And Sarah Gonzalez has been working with us since our inception. Sarah's like my other grandmother. I love her with all my heart. And she's been in the business since the late 60s. And so to me, she's the best cigar maker in the world. She taught me how to properly construct the cigar, how to properly make a cigar. When you make the bunch, when you take those filler tobaccos, you take the seco tobacco, the lighter tobaccos, those viso tobaccos, the medium texture tobaccos, and then the ligero. It's so important to put that ligero tobacco rock solid right in the center. And then you take that binder leaf and you make the bunch, And then after the bunch, after they're in the press molds, then you pass the wrappers and how to properly take the wrapper tobacco, get that good stretch so aesthetically looks beautiful, but also so that wrapper seals with that binder. So when you light that cigar, that they're together and the cigar will burn perfectly. So, she made, as a kid, she had me make many cigars. So to understand how the process and how it works. So, I'm just so blessed that my dad was able to put me and took the time, invested time to, put me with some of the best people in our industry. So I'm just truly blessed.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, before we go to you, Willy, what I would like to do now is to share a video with everybody. Take a look at this, and then we will proceed with more interesting questions with our guests. I don't know about you guys, but watching videos like these just makes me miss being in Nicaragua so much. It's been so long. It's been so long. It's so... Anyways, Willy, I'm obviously very interested to know a couple of who are a couple of key people that made a difference in your experience and in the evolution of the Willy Herrera that we know today and we love smoking the cigars of. I'm also interested to know your view as to when is the stage set for the master blender to come in? Are you involved at a certain point, or you feel the need to be involved from the cycle, from the beginning, in a 360 approach to make sure that whenever you kick in or wherever your magic starts, you're starting on the right foundation or on the right grounds, rather than not being happy with what you got to work with? When does your job really start?
Well, I'll answer that second part first.
Okay.
you know, when you're coming up with a new brand or a new blend, you know, you're, for me at least, I can't speak for others, but for me, I like to be involved from the conception, from the idea of what it is we're going to release, because based off of that, you know, is how you know what direction to take, what type of a cigar you're going to blend, what type of tobaccos are you going to work with, what type of wrapper are you going to use for this product. You know, for me, we start, you know, talking about ideas, concepts, what's the market, what are we looking for? What are going to be the vitolas that we're going to come out with? Are we looking for something to target the medium body smoker, the milder smoker, the full body smoker? And you know, what is the packaging going to look like? Is it going to be something more traditional? Is it going to be something more Drew Estate, like I call? There's so many components that go into the, you know, coming out with that final product, being that blend that you end up going with. For me, you know, I'm always involved from the beginning all the way through the end, whether it's looking at what tobaccos we might have gotten in, maybe something new, the process of the pilongs, existing wrappers that we have, how are they coming along? Are they burning? Do we have enough? For me, it's a total 360 when we're talking about, you know, coming up with a new blend, a new cigar, a new brand. For me, it's being involved with everything. And then, you know, early on, I always joke around, but it's very true. You know, my let's call it education in tobacco, you know, was, I say, elementary, high school in our little factory here in Miami. And then my college education really began at Drew Estate. And the reason I say that is because in our little factory here, we didn't have any more than anywhere from 6 to 8 tobaccos in total. That's binders, different wrappers, and the different fillers. So when I came onto Drew Estate is when it really began for me. And the person who kind of took me under her wing was Yesenia Moncada, who's in charge of our factory or production, tobacco buying in our factory. She's the one that really started teaching me about all these other tobaccos that I had never seen or worked with before, because we just didn't have access to that being here in Miami. You know, the avenues that were open for me all happened once I joined Drew Estate. I started meeting all these different suppliers, different farmers, different growers, and getting that first time taste of all these different tobaccos that were out there. You know, up to that point, I just knew what we had and how to create different things with the limited amount of tobaccos that we had in our factory here at that time. So, you know, as far as people that I looked up to while being in our little factory here before Drew Estate, you know, were a lot of the brands, our owners of brands or factories of brands that I enjoyed smoking, you know, Pepin, the Padrones, the Perdomos, Olivas, you know, all those brands, Pete Johnson with the Tatuajes, Padilla with the 8 and 11s when he had them. I mean, so many great brands that are out there. And, you know, those were all cigars that I enjoyed. And I'm like, back then I was like, man, I want to be like these guys. I want to be able to have a cigar to get out for everybody to try. I don't want just the walk-ins and the locals to come in to try these cigars that I'm coming up with and that we're creating. And so that was always my, you know, kind of goal, was get to a point where I had this avenue to get all these cigars for people to try and to enjoy the same way I enjoyed them.
And if I may, based on the experience that you've had, when was it that you literally woke up one morning and decided, wait, I can do this. This is what I was born to do. I mean, from the factory, you had the opportunity to move to Drew Estate, which must have been, I mean, at least if I were in your shoes, scary. I don't want to use the word,
to say the least,
but definitely scary and a huge responsibility. But when did you wake up one morning and realize, you know what? I get this. The reason why I ask you this is we have a lot of people here with us on the call that might actually be blenders in their heart and soul, and they're not aware of that fact. How does a person know that he has what it takes to become a blender? I think Ian can be a blender, but how does he know that I am a blender?
At least for me, I think it started to happen, with a lot of those walk-ins and those phone calls that I would get a week, 2 weeks later, getting the reviews of those cigars that I had given to all those people that had walked into our factory. And they were all positive. Some were, it was okay, or I didn't like this, or I didn't like that. But for the most part, people were enjoying these cigars. And then, we started to get a lot of people to come to our factory to create a cigar for them. So now I was kind of like at this spot where, like, oh man, well, now I'm not only creating stuff that I enjoy and stuff for us to sell here at our store, but I'm also now making a brand or a blend for this company that's going to be a brand that has to sell, that they need to like. And so I think it was a multi-step for me. It started, like I said, with those samples that I would give to the walk-ins and getting the feedback. And for the most part, they were positive. And then the next step was, getting these brand owners, let's call it, coming to our little factory for me to create something for them. And then them smoking that and say, oh, wow, this is fantastic. This is the blend that I want. And then now all of a sudden we're making a brand for somebody, whether it was an existing company already that had brands, but they wanted something boutique-y or made in Miami, or a new company that was starting out with a new brand in the market. And then, the third step and the main step was when I was approached by Jonathan and said to me, I love what you're doing. I'm hearing all the buzz of everything you're doing. I'm following all these, different brands that you've created these blends and these cigars for. And I like what you're doing. And I would like to know what you think about, obviously it's a big thing, leaving your family's factory and going to work for another factory. But he asked me, what do you think? Talk it over with your mom. He calls my mother-in-law my mom, again, because we've been together for so long. She's basically raised me. And, speak it, talk it with them, talk it with your grandparents, and let me know. And so that was the point that was like, wow, people really like the stuff that I'm doing. Whether or not, I called myself a blender or not at that time, I just knew that the tobaccos and the cigars I was creating, people liked them, and I liked them. And, I made the move and moved over to Drew Estate, not to be the master blender of Drew Estate. The reason why he asked me to come on board to Drew Estate was to continue to expand the traditional side of cigars for Drew Estate, to bring that Cuban style, that Cuban mentality, the way that I was taught and the way that I learned how to blend and how to work with tobaccos, to bring that into Drew Estate. And I guess if you could call it, that was the affirmation, I guess, for me. Okay, wow, so I know what I'm doing. I wouldn't have gotten this far, So it just kept going after that. And in this tobacco, whether you've been in it for 50 years or 2 years or 5 years, you're always learning something new. You never know everything there is to know about tobacco, because there's always new tobacco coming out. There's hybrid tobacco coming out that you're not going to ferment the same way you ferment something else. So it's a constant learning thing. And for me, that's one of the biggest things, is there's no time to get bored, because there's always something new, whether it's, a new seed type of filler leaf that a farmer is working on, or a new seed type of wrapper leaf that a farmer is working on. It's always something different, and it's always something unique. It's the flavor profile you're going to get out of that new tobacco. It's not what you've been used to. So then your whole learning process starts all over again. And it's a whole new journey, a whole new set of, obstacles to figure out how and what can you use to make this tobacco work. So it's a constant challenge, and that's what I love about it. It's the constant challenge to create things, and come up with something out of, like I always say, out of dried up leaves. And you put all these dried up leaves together, and you come up with a product that you smoke, and you're like, wow, and it takes you somewhere. And that's what I love about it.
I think you just nailed the quintessence of what makes cigars so magical and mythical in their experience. And I mean, when we look at the video that we shared, all these little steps, all these 200, 300 elements and parts of craftsmanship, people putting their heart and soul and their blood, sweat, and tears into all this. And then it comes to that one moment where you light up the cigar and or just a little fuma, and suddenly, as you rightfully mentioned, it takes you places. That act, the tasting, where it all comes together, still is such an individual and such a subjective process, because tasting can mean an awful lot to many different people. And it also depends on whether you're sampling a cigar for review purposes, and a totally different ball game for both of you as blenders. So my question then becomes, what is the difference, and how do you individually think about tasting in sensory evaluation and the analytical component, where tasting truly becomes the core foundation and the basis for what later on happens in the blending department?
Nick, you want to go?
For us, for our company, I mean, we're vertically integrated. We grow all our tobacco in Nicaragua, and we buy wrapper tobaccos from Ecuador from a company called ASP. Those are Connecticut wrappers. You have to know your tobacco. For me, we have tobacco, we grow tobacco for 4 different regions: Ometepe, Condega, Jalapa, and Esteli. And my 2 favorite of the 4, I love them all, but my 2 favorites, Jalapa and Esteli. So for example, when we make a blend, for example, I know that with the filler tobaccos, I know Jalapa is going to produce sweeter type of tobaccos, where Esteli is more your powerhouse, stronger type of tobaccos. And tobaccos from Condega and Ometepe, they're more of tobaccos, lighter tobaccos. They give nice aroma, but also, they're light. They're good for combustibility when you put those tobaccos into the blend. So, for us, it's just for me personally, I believe it's knowing the materials that you're working with. For me, I like Connecticut wrappers. I love Cuban seed, sun-grown Cuban seed Maduro wrappers. I'm a big Connecticut guy. I love that Connecticut imparts the sweet, a little bit of a creaminess, but overall, I find it to be a little bit more of a neutral wrapper, which allows those Nicaraguan fillers, when we make a blend, it allows those Nicaraguan fillers to really shine and show what those flavors really are, even more so, where I find that the sun-grown Maduro wrappers, they're a little bit heavier. Sun-grown has a little bit more of a spice, and the Maduro, which Maduro in Spanish means ripe, so it has a natural sweetness to it. So, but I think the most important thing is knowing your materials, knowing what you're working with, and that's my opinion.
Willy, how did you start on building that sensory database in your head that you need as a foundation of being able to then later on evaluate all those various raw materials that you have, and envisioning how they will come together in a blend later on?
For me, and it's how I learned it here in our factory in the early stages, before Drew Estate, I would roll what we call tabaqueados, or little puritos of just that tobacco. So, depending on the leaf, I get 1 or 2 leaves, bunch that, devein a third, use one of those sides as the wrapper, and wrap the whole thing. So what I was smoking was purely just that tobacco. A lot of times people tend to get more of a neutral binder, like an Indonesian or something like that, or Connecticut, and use that as kind of the binder with this new filler they want to try out. But I always like using just the tobacco. And, sometimes it's more difficult, because if you're trying to smoke a ligero to get the flavor of the nuances and the flavor profile of that new tobacco, it's kind of difficult sometimes to get a decent side of that leaf. But that for me is the true way to get that flavor of what that individual tobacco is going to taste like. And then somehow, I don't know how, but somehow I keep that in my head. Don't ask me what I had for breakfast, because I can't remember. But somehow I can remember what this tobacco's like, what this type is like, what this tobacco from this particular farm. It could be the same grower with multiple farms, and it be the same seed type. And they're all going to be unique. They're all going to be different. They're individually going to have something that you're either going to like or dislike. And somehow in my head, I remember it. I know, okay, I want the tobacco from this farm, from this grower, and I know why. And and a funny story is when I first joined Drew Estate, I'm working in the first brand, and so we go to one of the suppliers. One of my favorite suppliers, because we have been using a lot of their tobacco here in our factory in Miami. And we thought, okay, we want to look at this, and this. Well, we get there and there's like 80 bales of one, close to 100 bales of something else, and I'm like, geez, all right, well, let's start. And so when I start opening up all these bales and taking out the tobacco and rolling little tabaquiaos out of every single bale, they're looking at me like I'm crazy, because I'm taking forever. But I needed to taste what these are all like, because I had not had experience with them other than what I knew that we used here in Miami. So during that process, I nailed down certain farms that the tobaccos that were coming from those farms had certain qualities that I wanted for my cigar, for the blend. And so fast forward to another couple months, we go back to go look at some more tobacco. Now it wasn't 80 or 100. Now it was like 50 and 30. And so little by little, they figured out, okay, let's not put everything. This guy knows what he wants. And so, it became a little bit easier for them, not loading up the warehouse floor with all these bales of tobacco. Because that's the thing with tobacco, the tobacco is going to taste what that soil and that farm is going to give to that tobacco plant. Whether it's the position where that farm is, how close to the river, how close to water, how much more sunlight, how much more shade, how much higher, how much lower the elevation is. And every tobacco gives you something, and you remember that. And then when it's time to come up with something new, depending what it is that you're looking for to come out with, okay, I know this tobacco from here is going to work with this binder, with this wrapper, and you put it together. Now, oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, a lot of times, stuff that on paper looks like it's going to be phenomenal doesn't work. And then you're like, how can this be? How is this tobacco sour? All these tobaccos are sweet, and this and that, and sometimes the complete opposite happens. And then you got to figure out why. And then you start dissecting. Is it maybe this seed type didn't work with this seed type? Is it this binder not working with this wrapper? Is the binder not working with one of the fillers? And to me, that's the fun part. That okay, let's figure this thing out. We got to make it work. And why is it not working? And you dissect and you roll it again and you smoke it and you're still not there. And then you put that one back, you take out another leaf. And, that's part of the fun for me.
You described how you think about those individual tobaccos. You memorize what they are like, how they will interact with each other. But what are the attributes that you are looking for? And what are those cornerstones that you memorize in order to categorize and sort of put your experience into buckets so it becomes memorable?
It's basically, I would say, like four. You got spiciness or strength. You have sweetness. You have what I call meatiness. This flavor that almost, it just coats your palate in a way that you want to chew it. You want to chew the tobacco.
Like an umami sensation?
I don't know how to put it into words, man, but it's chewy. It makes you want to chew it because the way it coats your whole palate, it's flavor. It's not like it's hitting your front palate or your back. No, it coats everything, and you're like, I want more of it, and you're just taking more puffs. And to me, I call that chewiness, meatiness. And then you have your aroma. What aroma does that tobacco give off as you're burning it? Is it pungent? Is it earthy? Is it you have that sweetness? I mean, it's for me, it's kind of those four things. And as I'm tasting all these different tobaccos, I'm like, okay, this goes here. Oh, this goes here. So when it's time to come up with a blend, depending what that blend is going to be, I know where to start at, and then regions, like Nick was saying, regions are a good starting point. Esteli is going to be typically the stronger tobacco. Jalapa is going to be the sweeter tobacco. Condega is kind of in the middle. You're going to have a little sweetness and a little bit of strength, but not much of both. So it's a nice mix of those two main, those are the three main growing regions. Ometepe also has tobacco, but that's how I put them into these little categories, and gives me kind of direction when we're going to start with something new.
Nicholas, are you sort of looking for the same attributes, or do you have your own way of categorizing the experiences that you have when rolling little fumas or tasting raw materials?
Sure, it's pretty similar, kind of like how Willy said, when you have tobacco and you're growing tobacco and you grow from a farm. First of all, tobacco, like how he said, it always changes. The crop that you have the following year, it's not going to be the same. It's never the same. And tobacco in a specific farm, you can have visos. For example, you can classify tobacco. You take all of the Ligero tobacco from one farm. It's not the same, even though it's from those tobaccos aren't going to be the same, even though they're from the same farm. But it might be close to a riverbed, where the soils are loamier. So that tobacco, even though it's Ligero, it's going to be a little bit lighter. It's going to be lighter than the tobacco that's in the center of that farm, And so it's always changed, but very similar. I mean, when we're looking to make blends, I mean, we go into our warehouses, we go into our facilities where we have the big pockets where we have the bales of tobacco that are aged, and kind of like how Willy said, you're opening up bales of tobacco. You're going through different, you're going through different type of sacred tobaccos. You're going through different type of viso tobaccos, different Ligero tobaccos. Some of them work, some of them don't. Depending. It's important what wrapper you put with a binder. If you use a binder for example, from Jalapa, and you use a Cuban seed sun-grown wrapper from Esteli, that for whatever reason, it's gonna the ash will be actually dark. It'll have almost like a blackish, like a dark gray color, just because of the way it's paired. So you have to really watch how you're mixing. It's not just throw tobacco here and here and make a blend. You really have to know your stuff. There's so much trial and error. I mean, it's kind of almost like process elimination, where when you're making cigars and you write them in a book, or you document what you're making. What works is what works. And sometimes you got to kind of keep it simple. My dad always taught me you got to keep it simple when you're blending. It works. It's not making the same thing over and over again, but know the foundation. For us, for me, I love tobacco from Jalapa, and I love tobacco from Esteli. So those, whatever I like, whatever I smoke, those two type of tobaccos, that's always going to be in the blend that I smoke, and to me, they're the best in the world.
We have a little something prepared for you, a special treat, because Henry Pineda is right in the middle of the Pilons at this moment, and he will give us a little bit of a live flair and a glimpse into the fermenting tobacco. And let's take a look all together into these bales and the Pilones of tobacco in the heart of Nicaragua. Henry.
Hey, how you guys doing? I've been in the background just listening, because you always learn something from the masters. And Nicholas, by the way, I was we were doing some we were checking some stuff in the factory in Jonathan's room the other day, and we were trying to organize some stuff in the factory, and I saw a really old painting that Jonathan has kept in his room for many years. So, or your grandfather, you know, Nick Perdomo Sr. And we were talking about it, you know, just remembering the old days when Jonathan got to Nicaragua and how your grandfather, you know, helped JD in the early days. Good memories, you know. It's a painting that Jonathan has had for many, many years. But I'm here, and this is actually a smaller facility that we have because the Drew Estate, we ran out of space. Just give me 1 second here. We ran out of space just recently, and we got 4 more facilities that had a lot of tobacco, but you know, every month we're doing fumigations, and I asked specifically this one not to be fumigated 2 days ago, just so we could do the on Friday actually, just so we could do the live video here, and just to show you guys a little bit. Let me switch the video. This is what we call pilones. It's a big pile of tobacco that has, on average, normally between 4,000 to 5,000 pounds of tobacco. You know, it's beautiful tobacco that we have here, and we have prepared a couple of leaves. You know, just to show a little bit of the process and the different stages that tobacco goes through while it's being fermented. You know, you guys were talking about, hey, you know, how do you guys decide, or how do you guys know the flavor or the taste? How do you get good at it? How do you know, right off the bat, you know, just by looking at tobacco, you know what flavor that tobacco has before you put it in a cigar. You know, when you think about, for example, how the industry used to work in the past here in Nicaragua. For example, when Jonathan came here, people would come and say, hey, you know, I don't have enough money to buy huge amounts of tobacco. And normally what people would do, or will still do, is they go buy tobacco that is already fermented. You know, when you're doing that, basically you have no control. You have not control of how you want the tobacco to taste, you know, because ultimately you're the one that decides how much you want to ferment the tobacco. You know, the farther more you ferment the tobacco, you lose the grasa, you lose the fatness in the leaf, and eventually you're gonna have a really nice texture, but the flavor is gone. You know, so by being able to buy your own tobacco, you know, and ferment it the way you want it, you know, Willy can go into the factory and say, hey, do not ferment this tobacco any longer. You know, I don't know if you agree with that, Willy, but you ultimately decide, okay, let's ferment this tobacco for let's say 5 months more, or let's ferment this only for 3 months more. You know, obviously that's something that you decide with the team, and obviously the tobacco will speak to you and say, hey, I'm ready, or I still need more time. You know, when you go into the pilons and you grab the leaves and try to stretch it, you know, and it still feel like the texture is not right, and then you make a little tabacao like you were mentioning, Willy, which is something that we do with the team here in Nica. Willy does it, the team does it, you know, just making tabacaos, going into the pilons every day, doing tabacaos, and see how the taste it's getting, you know, by the amount of the time that the tobacco has been in the pilon fermenting. And one thing that I want to show you guys is it's something really interesting here, is that I don't know if you'll see that we call these tobacco hands. These tobacco hands have different colors. For example, this one has blue, right? If I grab another one, and I have another one right here, this one has red, right? There's another one here that has white. I don't know if you can see it, but this pilon that I'm showing you guys right now is really really in the stage of fermenting, and that's why you see the 3 types of tobacco combined. But for example, this blue one is the viso. The red one normally represents the ligeros, and the white ones normally represents the secos. So basically, at some point, they are going to split them and separate them, so the visos are going to go into one pilon. Then the red ones are going to go into, which are the ligeros, are going to go into a separate pilon. So meaning that you don't want to ferment a seco with the ligero, because obviously the ligero is going to need more time. And so if you try to do that, basically by the time the ligeros are fermented, the secos are going to be overcooked. So the tobacco will have no pliability whatsoever. So when you try to put it in a cigar, the tobacco is going to break apart, So this part of the process is so important for a master blender to do it right. When you think about when Drew Estate started buying tobacco, and this is just from a historical standpoint of view, we didn't know how to ferment tobacco. We learned through a lot of trials, and mistakes. We lost a lot of money in the process. We were some of the first companies that brought leaf tobacco to Nicaragua, and the first batch, the company lost more than $250,000 worth of tobacco just by not knowing how to do this process. So it's so important that, as Willie was saying, to get immersed in the process as early as possible, so you can try to control not only the flavor that you want to get, but also the quality of the tobacco that you want to get. So I don't know if you guys so far.
Henry, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing those wonderful insights and giving us a glimpse right into the pilons and right towards the tobacco. I believe that's an amazing opportunity for everybody out there watching to sort of almost be there and get a hands-on feel of what things look like in Nicaragua at the moment. Right.
Indeed. Thank you, Henry. I love that Henry took us in a direction that we wanted to touch on, which is getting quite technical and quite detailed. I really want us to get into the heart and go into the fundamentals and the basics and the details of how to blend. I want the gentlemen that are with us, with their experience, to really give us a very detailed idea of how. I know I might sound like I'm repeating myself, but the thing that's going through everyone's head is, how do I actually blend? How do I actually build a blend? What does it take? And what are the processes that I go through to make sure that this blend or this cigar ends up being something good? And when do I decide? Because, I mean, different people will give you different feedback about cigars. Some might like it, some might not like it. But when do you, as a blender, decide that this cigar has been a success, this blend has been a success, and we should launch it the way it is? I want us, if you would be so kind as to share with us a bit more technical details on the formula of a blend and its success factor. And we can start with you, Nick.
Well, I think, overall, when you blend cigars, I think the most important thing is having patience. In reality, it takes a long time to create blends. Blends aren't made overnight. And, the materials that you work with, for us, always our blends, the two main tobaccos we're always going to have is tobaccos from Jalapa and tobaccos from Esteli. And depends, it's going to either be within Seco, Viso, or Ligero of the three. So for us, those are the two most important tobaccos. And then, of course, we use tobaccos from Condega and we use tobaccos from Ometepe. But I think overall, I mean, it's such a long process. I remember as a kid, the first time I remember, working, with blends, and I remember my dad said, we're going to make blends. So I automatically assumed, okay, I'll meet you in the rolling room. And I just went to the rolling room, and one of our factory managers said, no, your father's not here. Your father's in the warehouse. Blending is done in the warehouse. Blending is done where we have those tobaccos. So, we have our factory manager, Sarah Gonzalez. We have our two general managers, Silvio Loaizaga, Miguel Rivera, my dad, myself. So we have a circle. We all have to come to an agreement. We're looking for cigars. You know, when you're making those, it takes years. You have to go through the bales of tobacco. You have to go through each. You got to figure out which ciclo you want. For example, filler. You know, you have to figure out which ciclo you want. You have to figure out which visa, which ligero, and what works best. And, you know, in essence, what we're looking for is we're looking for the most balanced cigar possible. You know, our cigars naturally, because they're from Nicaragua, our cigars are going to be a little bit more to the fuller body because of the type of tobaccos, the thicker type of tobaccos that Nicaragua produces because of those volcanic grounds. So, you know, we're trying to use tobaccos minimum 5 years aged, for example, because it needs that age. It needs those tobaccos, especially after fermentation and when they're properly fermented, those tobaccos have to round out. You need to give those tobaccos time. And so, you know, for us, we're looking for balanced type of cigars. We're looking to make balanced blends. You know, when we make, you know, Connecticut wrappers, believe it or not, they have a pretty high concentration of nicotine. So when you almost have to tame down the blends, because especially since we're using tobaccos from Nicaragua, because we can make a cigar, even though the tobacco, it's a light wrapper, we can make a cigar that could make your head pop off. You know, I mean, we have that capability because of where we grow tobacco in Nicaragua, especially tobaccos from Esteli, which are super powerful. So, you know, in essence, the whole thing we're looking for is to make a very balanced, a very enjoyable cigar. And, you know, the whole thing is, it's the old Cuban way. It's the way that my great-grandfather, Silvio Perdomo, when they were in the industry in Cuba, we believe in having balanced cigars where you could pick up 2 and 3 cigars where you could smoke them and enjoy them, not super heavy, powerful, you know, almost tobaccos are kind of like under fermented, where it blows your head off, and you might be able to smoke 1 or half of that cigar. So, you know, blending, you have to have patience. It takes a long time, like how I said. So, you know, that's pretty much it for us. That's how I look at it. You gotta have patience.
Willy?
Well, patience is the key. You know, you definitely can't rush a blend. You can't say I'm gonna have a blend out in 3 months, because you never know. You know, for us and for me, the process is a little bit different. I go, my starting point is I need to know what is this cigar for? Whether if it's for a private client, whether it's a store exclusive that we're working on, whether it's something that we're gonna plug a hole in our portfolio, a segment, a cigar we don't have at the current time. Whether it be strength level or a type of wrapper that we might not have at the time. And then based off of that, you know, let's say, for example, okay, we want to come out with something Cameroon. We don't have anything with Cameroon wrapper. Well, I know Cameroon is a very delicate wrapper. It's a very delicate tobacco. It's not, you know, very strong tobacco. It's got a great sweetness to it. So you're not going to work with very heavy tobaccos, because you don't want to mask the beauty of that wrapper and the nuances that wrapper offers. So you're going to go with, you know, milder tobaccos, not a very strong blend, because overall, like Nick was saying, you want the balance. For me, that's key. Balance in a cigar is key. To me, if I light up a cigar and after that first inch, it's just either one-dimensional or it's harsh and it's not balanced, I'm done with it. I'm not going to keep smoking it. So for me, balance is key. The aroma is very important as well. The combustion of the cigar, and you know, you look at what it is you're trying to create, for who, for what, why. Every cigar has to have a reason, a purpose, a story. And based off of all of those elements is how you choose what tobaccos to work with and what tobaccos to incorporate to come up and achieve that goal and that cigar that you want to bring out to market.
But when a chef is preparing a menu or a meal of some sort or a dish of some sort, I mean, you gentlemen, I find it to be a bit more difficult, because similar to a chef, you're not only the nose, you're the mouth, you're the brain, you're the eyes, you're all the senses that go around the consumption and the enjoyment of a cigar. a chef, when he puts together a plate, he looks for something that's sweet, something that's, the whole, as you said, the roundness on the palate or the balance on the palate. Is this something that you consider as you are putting the blend? Okay, so what is going to be the one that's going to add the dash of sweetness that I'm looking for? What is going to be the tobacco that's going to add that sense of creaminess that I want for? Do you build it? Do you cascade the tobacco? Or I don't know, maybe my question in light of your knowledge about this sounds very naive, but is that the way you do it? Do you build the flavors on top of each other?
Yeah, that's why what I was trying to say is, depending on what type of cigar it is you're trying to bring to market, that's going to guide you on what tobaccos. So if somebody's looking for something really mild, but they want this nuttiness and sweetness, then you're going to go towards those tobaccos that are going to give you the sweetness, the nuttiness, not overly spicy, not overly strong. So you start off with the concept, what type of a cigar it is that you're looking for. And then that's going to guide you. Okay, I'm going to go with this wrapper. I'm going to go with this binder. For example, let's say you come to me and you want a cigar made, but you hate spice. Well, I'm going to shy away from a lot of Criollo seed tobaccos because Criollo seed tends to be spicy. I'm going to go more towards the Corojo seeds and stay more towards the Jalapa and Condega. I'm going to shy away from Esteli because it's typically going to be spicier. Even the Seco is going to have a little bit more body, more spice than a Seco from Jalapa. So it all depends on what type of cigar it is that we're looking to come out with and for who and what market. And that's going to dictate, okay, I'm going to go with some Dominican tobaccos in the blend. I'm going to go with some Honduran tobaccos in the blend, some Brazilian tobaccos in the blend. What type of wrapper? Do I want to go with the broadleaf that's heavy, earthy, it's got some spice, but it also has some sweetness? Or do I want to go with some Brazilian Marafina that is not that strong, but it still has some of that sweetness? Everything revolves around the concept and what type of a cigar it is that you're trying to achieve. And that's going to dictate what seed types you're going to work with, what varieties of tobacco you're going to work with, countries of origin. All that plays a role, but you need to know what type of a cigar it is you want to come out with. That's why for me, it's so important to be involved from the beginning, from the concept, what type of a cigar, what type of packaging, what's the market that we're going to target with that cigar, so that when I go to the floor, I know what tobaccos to start with,
Excellent,
Yep.
thank you.
We have so many great questions from people coming in, and even here at the lounge, we've got a couple of hands raised for quite a bit. Jem, El Lector, please bring up your questions. We would love to have you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Reinhard, and thank you, our hosts, for an yet again amazing night, and thank you, our guests, for taking the time to be with us. I guess my question is going to be fitting very well since we are going a bit technical. What is, in your opinion, the importance of the binder while you are choosing your blend? Because the wrapper is the dress of the cigar. The fillers are the heart of the cigar, and literally and also mentally, binder is somewhere in between. So do you keep the binder to be rather neutral and want the wrapper and the filler have their say in the blending or in the blend? Or do you use it for a secret, I don't know, as a secret ingredient?
Nick, you want to take that? You want me to jump?
Sure, I'll take it. Yeah, so I mean, the binder is very important, but also the binder depends on the wrapper that you're going to use. So, for example, if I use a Connecticut wrapper, which is a lighter wrapper in terms of texture, I'm going to use a thicker binder. And if I use a heavy Cuban seed Maduro wrapper, I'm going to use a thinner binder, because if I use thick on thick, basically the combustibility is not going to be good. So the binder is very important. The binder does impart flavor. We use Cuban seed. Our binder is Cuban seed. And so usually it's a sun grown, or it depends on what we use. So if for Perdomo champagne, we use a thick Cuban seed Maduro binder to go over top, and or I'm sorry, before to hold the filler tobaccos together. So the binder is very important. It is a leaf, and it does impart flavor. I would say, in my opinion, I think it imparts probably about 8 to 10% of the flavor. So.
Willie, you want to add to that?
Yeah, for me, every tobacco in a cigar, in a blend, plays a role. Every tobacco has a role. There are milder tobaccos, more neutral tobaccos, but at the end of the day, even if you grab that neutral tobacco, say an Indonesian Sumatra binder, not very strong, not very powerful, not too sweet, but it's got flavor. And at the end of the day, all the tobaccos that you're going to put in a bunch, unless it was tobacco that's 50 years old and it wasn't stored the right way, that's probably not going to have any flavor at all. But all the tobacco that we use, like they use in their facility, it's been taken care of. It's been put in those bales. It's been put in an environment where it continues to mature and it continues to age. So no matter what the tobacco seed type it is or priming it is, if it's a seco, it's still going to have some kind of flavor. Now, certain tobaccos are used more for combustion, especially in the filler. But oftentimes, like Nick was saying, if you got a heavy wrapper, a heavy leaf wrapper, you're going to go with a thinner binder because you want to make sure that it's going to help it burn properly. You don't want it to get stuck and it starts bubbling up on you, which could be either a cause from under fermentation or just a wrapper that's just not burning even at the same rate that the wrapper is burning. So for me, it's equally important for all the components of the cigar, whether it's the seco, the visa, the ligero, the binder, the wrapper, they're all going to play a role of the overall blend profile and taste of that cigar. And again, like I was saying earlier, it all depends what type of cigar you're looking for. What's the body? What's the strength? Do you want something spicy? Do you want something sweeter? Do you want something more, aromatic, more flavorful? And that's when you start putting all these different components in, and you start building that cigar. Your fillers, your binders, and your wrappers, but they're all going to play a role. And the key is to get all of those components to give you an overall finished product flavor profile that you're going to enjoy at the end.
And now let me take things even further and paint a bit of a different picture, because blending and tasting and evaluating is not solely about creating something new, but probably even more importantly, it's about keeping the consistency. And if we take a very simple example here to bring that to people's attention, let's say you use a particular binder because we were talking about it, or a component in the filler, and last year's crop was incredible, but then suddenly the new crop comes along and it's different. And that seco is just not what it used to be. How do you react? What is the job of the master blender right there to keep the cigar in its integrity and consistency and make it what people love?
That's the key. That's the key. That's our key role. It's not solely coming out with new products and new blends. It's maintaining all the existing brands and all the existing cigars, blends that you've come up with in the years past. And I tell people all the time, in these events that we do, it's the hardest part. And, it's the part that unless you're living in the factory, which I'm not, I'm dependent on my team. I'm depending on the people on that factory floor. Luis, Jose, Joel, Maria. They're the ones that every time a new bale of tobacco gets introduced to the factory floor for whatever line it is that they're making, with that bale, they make a sample and they smoke it. and make sure that the amount that they've been putting of that particular tobacco is going to be the same. Like you were saying, maybe some years, let's say the Ligero was really strong, and that was the reason and the purpose why that tobacco was chosen for a blend. But now that next bale that comes out, that strength isn't there. Well, now you have to adjust. It's in the cigar factory world, nothing's ever staying the same. You're constantly adjusting. You're adjusting the Ligero, you bring it down, you bring it up, you adjust the Viso, you adjust the Secos, because every crop is different. And we do our best, and our suppliers do their best, because they know exactly what we're looking for to give us what we want. But depending where that particular tobacco in that bale came from on that farm, or which farm, it might be slightly different. So for us, it's key to make these samples every single time tobacco comes into the factory floor before it gets introduced to the moncheros, to make a sample of that blend and make sure, okay, yeah, this 1.5, you could put the 1.5. No, this is too strong. Bring it down to 1 leaf. And then you adjust your Secos and your Visos in that blend, because it's every bale is slightly different.
Sorry if I just cut in there for a moment, but what does adjusting then really look like? Do you move up or down a priming? Do you change the tobacco entirely, or just add a little more of it, like half a leaf? Or how does that adjusting process truly work?
Yeah, you adjust your other fillers in that blend. You're never going to swap one tobacco for another tobacco from another country. You're never going to do that, because you're going to change your blend. What you're going to do is you're going to adjust. And what I mean by adjust, you might go from 1.5 leaves to maybe 1 leaf. Or if you start off with 1 leaf, you might go to 1.5 leaves. If you're Viso, you're using 1 leaf, you might come down to half a leaf, or whatever the amount is. But you never, ever swap the tobacco for another tobacco that wasn't originally in that blend.
Perfect.
While I'm on the same subject, is there such a thing in the world of blending as upgrading or improving a blend? Or am I thinking too much in terms of food?
Not for us at Drew Estate, because, you know, when we launched the brand, a blend, a cigar, we were confident, and we fell in love with that blend. So there's nothing to upgrade. At that point, that was the blend we fell in love with. Now, if a new tobacco was introduced to Drew Estate, for whether it be a new hybrid tobacco, or a new farmer has a new seed type, or a new farmer is growing tobacco that we've never tried the tobacco, then we bring that tobacco in and find another brand, find another home, or create a home for that new tobacco. But you never swap out a tobacco that you originally came out with, because if the tobacco wasn't what you were looking for, at least for us, I can't speak for Nick, he could after, you wouldn't have come out with a brand. You wouldn't have came out with that cigar. You wouldn't have came out with that wrapper. You wouldn't have came out with that cigar using that binder. So, you know, for us, and we're not a company that comes out with many cigars every year. 2 or 3 years might go by, and then we have something new. And that's part of the reason, is because we need to be certain that the tobaccos that we have, that we're going to use, we love that blend, and we're not looking to change it later on. Oh, let's come out with this year, and we'll put a nicer wrapper next year. We don't look at things like that.
Nick, what's your perspective?
I agree a lot with what Willy had to say. I mean, you know, when you come out with a blend, you know, you have to have confidence in the blend. You know, when we, for example, you know, an old brand that we've had for going on 17 years now is a brand called Perdomo Champagne. So we've kept, you know, tobacco changes, but overall we've kept the same type of Ligero, the same type of Seco tobacco, the same type of Viso, the binder tobacco, obviously the wrapper tobacco. Those years change, but overall we still have those same components, those same materials that we still make that cigar. And that's, at the end of the day, my dad always had a saying, it's the truth, and what he taught me, you're only as good as your inventory. So there's certain times too where, for example, you know, where, you know, we had a brand we just retired called Perdomo Champagne Noir, which is a Maduro wrap cigar, and Perdomo Champagne Sun-Grown. And the reason we retired those brands was because the truth is we ran out of those cigars. We ran out of those tobaccos. So what we did was we, instead of making another cigar and, you know, you have different tobaccos, because we just ran out of those tobaccos. And instead of being really, in my opinion, disingenuous, you know, we just decided let's retire the brand, those two brands in whole. And so, you know, we came out with what I'm smoking now, the new Perdomo Reserve 10th anniversary Sun-Grown and new 10th anniversary Maduro in place of that. So instead of making, you know, having that brand and using tobaccos that we don't have anymore, you know, that's when, you know, kind of the upgrade in a way, where now we have newer tobaccos. And so, you know, we've been working on blends for years, and you know, that's how we came up with these new Perdomo 10th anniversary, both in Sun-Grown and Maduro. So in a way, in my opinion, I think that we did upgrade those cigars from the original brands, but we retired those original brands because we did run out of those tobaccos. So.
Okay. All right. A question that's coming through is give us an idea about your daily work. Everybody thinks that you have the best job and all what you do is you just sit there and smoke cigars. You know, I'm a believer that's what all you guys do. You just smoke cigars and you get lucky with a blend every now and then. Just kidding. I have all the appreciation to your work, obviously. But what's your typical day? Give us an idea of what your typical day looks like, your typical blending day, of course, and everything that relates to it. Willy, would you like to start on that one?
Well, you know, in part you were right, man. It's a lot of smoking. It's not always good smoking because not everything that you start working on when you're creating a blend is very good. You know, sometimes, you know, it takes a while. Like Nick was saying, sometimes it's years for you to achieve a certain profile that you're looking for a cigar. And so you're doing a lot of smoking, that's for sure. You're doing a lot of smoking throughout the day. But, you know, in the middle of all that, you're looking at production. You're going through cigars of existing brands. You're walking up and down the aisles, picking up cigars, lighting them up and tasting them, making sure that consistency. One of our biggest things is consistency. And the only way you achieve that consistency is by smoking a cigar at the end of the day. And so there's a lot of smoking, not only test blends that you've worked on when you're working on blends, but you're smoking existing brands. Whatever brands it is that's going on that day in the factory, you're walking, pick one up, you light it up. Go to the next aisle, pick something else up. And then you're looking at tobacco. Then you're going over to the building, one of the buildings that we have, like where Henry was, and you're looking at the pilons, how the tobaccos coming along, how much time is left in any particular tobacco, whether it's the broadleaf, the San Andres, the stock cut Habano, whatever tobacco we currently have that we're fermenting, you're looking at that. How much more do we have? Where is it at? Take it out, open it, you know, burn it, look at the tobacco. It's just so many components that go on a daily basis. That's not just smoking. You're going to quality control. What's going on in quality control? Are they taking out more cigars than normal? Why are they taking out the cigars? Is there a lot of cigars being plugged? Is there a lot of cigars that is having issues with wrappers? Is there cigars that are too tight, too loose? And it's so many different parts that goes on every day that, you know, typically when you walk into the factory, or when I walk into the factory floor, everybody's like, oh man, here he comes. Because stuff is going to happen because, you know, at the end of the day, you know, the cigars got to be right. And, you know, hey, listen, they're all made by hand and by humans. It's not a machine. And people have their good days, people have their bad days. And people sometimes come back to work after a long weekend and they might not be ready to be rolling cigars after a long weekend, or you got people getting ready to go off on a long weekend. So they're excited. They're going to go to San Juan de Sur. They're going to spend the week on the beach. They're hurrying up, and maybe the cigars, you're having more issues. So it's a lot of components other than just smoking cigars. Yes, it's a big part of it, but not solely of new stuff you're working on. It's a lot of smoking of existing brands. You're going through a lot of cigars you have in the cool room of stuff you've worked on in the past, see how it's changing, see how it's transitioning. Is it going towards what you thought it was going to go to? It's just a lot of different little pieces for that puzzle, man. It's not every day you're doing the same thing, that's for sure. Then you're dealing with problems. You're always dealing with problems in the tobacco industry. Oh, we're running short on a certain tobacco, or these tobaccos, they're not fermenting in the time that we thought they were going to ferment. It's going to be another 3 months. Oh my God, we're going to run low, and what are we going to do? So, it's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Nick, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, but while I hear that, I would love you to give us a flavor of the fact that you're heading sales now. Your side of the sales, how does that reflect as far as Perdomo's production, as far as is being involved in the sales gives you an idea of what your production should be or what people are seeking? And does that reflect on your blends in any way, shape, or form? I'm sure the kind of feedback that you get sort of impacts your daily operation or your daily interaction with the team.
Sure. So yeah, I'm national director of sales. So so for me, I'm on the road a lot. I do a lot with Zoom now, especially with what's going on in the world. So so basically my job is very much so intertwined with our operation in Nicaragua. Overseeing the coordinated productions. On average, we get 2 shipments a month. So my numbers based on what we sell and you look at what you're bringing up from Nicaragua in terms of cigars. So, my job really is, I work one-on-one with our production coordinator, Nelson Cuba. And then, so there's a lot of forecasting, but, for us personally, overall, we have such strong inventories of cigars, of tobacco. And listen, my dad, we've been in Nicaragua now, we're going on our 25th year at the end of this year. So, my dad's done a really great job of implementing an amazing system where there's so much consistency, and not because he's just my dad, but it's the truth. And, our inventories are so great. So, overall, we've maintained, I think we're well known for being very consistent in terms of our blends. So, so for me, the whole thing is now, looking at intertwine, putting together our sales and our production and making sure that we have the right numbers, based off what we sell and forecasting, when we bring up cigars, where we have to make sure we're all on the same page. But overall, I think based on our inventories of tobacco, we have very little issues with shipping, and we have very little out of stock. So overall, I have to give credit to my dad in terms of with everything with this, where we have such great systems and set, and the processes step A through all the way through Z were really solid. So he's made my life very easy.
Excellent. A lot of great questions coming in, and we're going to make sure to take as many as possible. Valerie, why don't you give us what you have in mind? I think you're on mute.
How about now?
There we go.
Good.
Sorry. Thank you to Willy and Nicholas for being part of this. Really appreciate it. I'm thinking about your terms of 360 and, cradle to grave, so to speak. But ultimately, just, that step before the grave is the end user, the consumer. And sometimes the consumer maybe doesn't have the experience in knowing how to make sure their cigars are at the right temperature, the right humidity before they smoke them. When it comes to the end user, what would you advise that they do when they pull a cigar out of their humidor that's at 69%? Should they dry box those cigars for a day or two, or that cigar for a day or two before they smoke it, just to make sure that all the work that you've put into it doesn't fall apart when it gets to the consumer?
Well, my opinion, to be honest with you, is I would say smoke them. You don't have to worry about any of that. That's our job. Our job is to make sure those cigars, are well aged, and those cigars are ready to smoke. By the time we put those cigars in boxes, the relative humidity is about 64 to 65%. And that's where we feel, because Nicaraguan tobacco is so thick, it doesn't need as much humidity, for example, as tobaccos from the Dominican Republic, which are thinner type of tobaccos. So in my opinion, I would say smoke them, enjoy them. It's our job to do that work for you. And if I can make a recommendation, if you have a humidor with Nicaraguan cigars only, I would say to drop that humidity down. My personal preference is about 65%, and I think that's the right humidity.
So Valerie, that's a big personal preference, I think. No different than the person who likes only Connecticut shade, or the smoker that likes only Maduros, or the person who likes only Dominican tobaccos in their cigars. For me, like Nick, the sweet spot is 65. I like my cigars a little bit drier, especially when you're talking about tobaccos from Nicaragua or Maduros. Drew Estate, we use a lot of Maduros, a lot of Mexican, a lot of broadleaf. And when you have that humidity at 69, at 70%, 68%, for me, the flavor is kind of, it's not all there in that wrapper, in that cigar. I tend to smoke my cigars drier, but then I've met people that like their cigars a little bit, more mushier, a little bit more with more humidity. I mean, I think that boils down to, preference. And a big part has to do with the retailer, the tobacconist, where they're buying the cigars. They are really the hands-on with the consumers and teaching them how to store the cigars, when the cigar should be smoked. Like Nick said, I'm of the opinion of the cigars on the shelf is ready to smoke. It's one of my biggest pet peeves when I hear that people buy the cigars and they set it aside for 5 years or 3 years. I ask them, why are you doing that? Oh, no, because when I say, hold on, how did you try that cigar first? No, I bought it at a store. Okay. Was it 5 years old? No. Did you fall in love with the cigar? Yes. So why are you now putting it away for 3 or 5 years? Because it's not going to be the same cigar. And so that's one of my biggest pet peeves. It's, if it's on the shelf, like Nick said, we did the hard work. We let them sit in that cool room. We let them age. And when they were ready, they got put into a box and sent to the store. Now, the only thing that would make me shut up would be, okay, the cigar, that first cigar the person had was given to him by somebody who had it for 5 years or 3 years or whatever it is. And then, okay, well, they fell in love with a cigar that had all that extra age. But if it's on the shelf, it's ready to smoke. Smoke it. Enjoy it.
Willy, let's probably draw the question of Valerie a little back into sort of the blending component and where your craftsmanship really comes into play. And thus, I'm curious, at what humidity level do you test the little fumas or raw materials? And at what humidity level is the blending done then before the individual tobaccos go to the rolling bench?
So in our factory, we have ACs constantly running, and then depending on the time of year, we'll close the doors, because if it's way too humid in Nicaragua is very humid. And if you're going through the rainy season, we shut the doors and turn on that AC on blast. So we're constantly maintaining between that 65, 68, in that range within the factory. Now, when you have the cool rooms, that's more of a controlled environment, and we keep that at that 65, 67 range, or somewhere around there. But when I'm smoking, whether it's a tabaquiao, because I'm trying new tobacco, or I create a new blend, I'm working on a blend, I'll smoke it right then and there on the table as soon as I rolled it. And I could tell what direction that cigar is going to take after it's been put in that cool room for 45 days, 60 days, what way is going to continue to go, and what path is going to continue to develop and change for the overall flavor that I'm looking for. you're never going to smoke, at least I'm never going to smoke something, soaking wet, because obviously it's not going to taste like anything other than bad. But it's definitely a controlled environment.
So because we're already well over 90 minutes into this wonderful show, and we've still got questions piling up, and people are all engaged and excited about the experience that you guys have to share, I would love to try something here with all of you, and let's maybe do a little quick fire question segment where we try to bring in as many of our dear friends and fellows and have very short and precise questions, and please feel free to direct them to either Willy or Nick, and let's have those questions answered right away. And one that we had from our dear brother Johan over here in Austria was, when you do test blends, is there a specific vitola that you choose for that? Would it be a traditional Robusto? And then how do you adjust for other vitolas of that line? Willy.
So when I'm in the blend, I always go with the Corona size. For me, the Corona size is right in the middle. It's going to give me what I'm looking for, to see what that wrapper is giving, what that binder is giving, and what that blend of those tobaccos are going to give me. And then you adjust. You adjust to go up to a Toro, double Corona, and you adjust to go down, say, to a Lancero or Petit Lancero. But I always start with a Corona. That's the way that I learned here at my family's factory in Miami. Was a Corona size. It's going to be right in the middle, and you're going to get a good idea of all those tobaccos in that blend.
And again, the way to sort of change that, or sort of adjust, would be to probably double the amount of a particular tobacco that you have in there, and thus keep the blend at a consistent performance level, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So if you're trying to come out with, you have a customer, or you want to come out with a really strong, blow your head off type cigar, well, you're going to use very little secos. You're going to use mainly visos and ligeros, but then your visos have to be, of that lower priming, so they will combust and they'll aid in the burning of the cigar. And then the same thing with your binder and your wrapper. But everything is, every tobacco is going to play a role. No matter if it's going to be, a super powerful cigar, you got to have tobaccos in there that's going to aid in that combustion. If not, you're going to light it up and you're just going to fight the cigar. I'm going to throw it out. Other people that might continue to light it and continue to light it and continue to light it, it's never really going to burn. And what it's going to give you is going to be this harshness, because you just keep charring and you keep puffing, and it's not going to go anywhere.
Perfect. Thank you. Over to Dorde.
Thank you, Reinhard. So great show as always, and needless to say, privilege and above expectations. Everything what's being said here. So I have a quick question for Willy and also for Mr. Perdomo regarding the art of blending. If, for example, let's say you are coming with the idea to have a cigar, doesn't matter what vitola size, but a cigar that you would like to be sweet and creamy without much spiciness or sour. Which components would you use? Which tobaccos would you use? What will be your preference? And especially regarding the wrapper type that you would use for that particular cigar. So on really the sweet side, the creamy side, without that much of spiciness or that dryness that some cigars can do. Thank you.
Nicholas, how about you go first? Because
okay.
I believe part of the answer you already provided, right?
Sure. So for me personally, I would use tobaccos, for example, in the fillers. I'd especially use tobaccos, visos, maybe a little bit of pinch of ligero. I would use from Jalapa, for example, which produces in Nicaragua, which produces sweeter, a little bit more aromatic tobaccos. Obviously, I use some Estelade because I think it's very essential for at least for our blends. And then I would use a Cuban seed binder, and then I would go between either a Cuban seed Maduro wrapper, which produces a little sweetness, and I think it has a little bit of touch of creamy. And then I would use a Connecticut shade wrapper, which I find to be the creamiest. So I would probably say a Connecticut shade wrap cigar, which has a lot of creaminess over Nicaraguan fillers, but especially I use more tobaccos from Jalapa, which are a little bit sweeter. But it would be a little bit more of I would say more of a medium body type of cigar.
You know, for me, I'm a big fan. I have always been a big fan of incorporating tobaccos from different countries. I tend to find Dominican tobacco, especially Corojo seed, to have a really nice creaminess and sweetness to it. It's a different sweetness than you get from the tobaccos from Jalapa. It adds a different level of complexity and a component to a cigar when you incorporate those tobaccos in that blend. So if I'm going for creaminess and that sweetness, I'm definitely going to go more with the Jalapa tobaccos, more of the visos. I probably stay away from the ligeros. I might use a higher priming viso, maybe from Esteli, so it has a little bit more punch, but not quite as strong as a ligero leaf would have. You're going to get that sweetness there. You're going to get that creaminess and somewhat of a sweetness from the Connecticut shade wrapper as well. And then the Dominican tobacco in there, especially those Corojo seeds, just I think rounds out the cigar, and it's a complex cigar. It's not a boring cigar. You know, you never want to, at least I never want to smoke a cigar that it's like just sucking on a straw and you're like not getting any flavor. For me, flavor is very big. And, you know, a cigar not being one dimensional is key. I always talk about the journeys. A cigar is like a roller coaster. It starts off one way and it goes down and it goes up another way and it's got turns. Because if not, at least for me, I get bored and I don't want to smoke it anymore. And a way I achieve that is by incorporating tobaccos from different regions, different countries, different areas, different seed types.
Dorda, many thanks for your questions. Next quick fire over to our brother Ian in the UK.
Question really for Willy. I mean, I love complex cigars, and I mean, some cigars have 6, 7 different leaves. How do you control in the factory that the Bonchero gets it right? And if you want, you know, a quarter of a leaf or a half of a leaf in a certain way, how do you ensure that they get it just right for you every time?
One word, man: trust. That is it. Because at the end of the day, you can't divide yourself up between 500 rollers in your factory. So, you know, they're all divided up. You know, they're all working on certain blends, certain lines. And when they're given a new blend, something new they haven't been working on, you stand there and you say, okay, no, this one is a half a leaf. No, this one, you look at their spread of how they have their tobacco. Typically, they'll have their tobacco from left to right, their secos, their visos, their ligeros. They'll have their binder off to the left, and they have the wrapper right in front of them. And you kind of walk them through it. Okay, this one goes here. This is 1.5. This is half. And you watch them. And then you watch them do a few cigars, you know, one mold, 2 molds, and you move on to the next one. And after that, it's trust. You can't be over them. You know, you can't have a little camera over them and looking at every camera as they're making every cigar. That's why it's so important to have that trust, not only in your rollers, but then the supervisors that go up and down those aisles, supervising the poncheros and the roleras. But then you have the supervisors that supervise those supervisors. And then finally, once the cigars go to quality control. So there's a lot of hands, there's a lot of eyes all the time, but ultimately, you're trusting that they're going to place that tobacco where it needs to be placed, and the amount is being placed like you say it's supposed to be, whether it's a leaf, a quarter leaf, a half a leaf, a leaf and a half. You know, ultimately it's trust.
Thank you.
And what would a Light 'em Up show be without our dear friend Riccardo Carioni joining us, the ambassador himself? Ricardo, take it away.
Thank you so much, Reinhard. And as always, it's such a pleasure to hear you and see you do your magic and drawing in your guests and making us, even everyone, feeling comfortable and loving it. So thank you and congratulations for the great work. Praid, that's dedication to the cigar cause, my friend. I think it's past 2 a.m. in Dubai. And look at you. You look quite awake and full of energy. Maybe you have some Nicaraguan coffee or Cuban coffee keeping you up and running, because that's incredible. And it's been incredible to hear today. It's been a real honor and a real privilege to hear from both of you, Willy and Nick. It is a great pleasure to meet you here, and I really look forward to having a chance to meeting you in person. I did spend a lot of time, probably my prime years in Miami, Little Havana, between 2000, 2005. So I know exactly where you are, and I envy you. I wish I was there with you. And I do have to say, right, imagine if that video, right, and all of you made you a little bit nostalgic of Nicaragua. You can barely imagine how I feel as a Nicaraguan in London.
Exactly.
Now here. And that's what I say here. And the closest I can be to Nicaragua is at the embassy. So diplomatic soil, I consider it my little Nicaragua hub here, but I can smoke my cigars. But incredible event. And I love that today, for today's topic, we have two brands and two gentlemen with so much knowledge. And I think it's iconic and symbolic. I'm very, very well chosen to bring it today. Drew State as a whole and Perdomo. I think we had an evolution of the different topics, and having had Hoya and Mombacho at the beginning with Sergio, and then Plasencia. And today when we're talking about master blending and the art of it, and in my very huge ignorance into the cigar world, particularly when it comes to this, it's been incredible to learn and to hear from two representatives and key people in two brands that in many ways, without a doubt, were responsible for the rebirth of the cigar industry in my country, and to take us where we are today. We wouldn't be where we are, and so many people wouldn't be there in the quality of life that they're living and the jobs that they're doing if it wasn't for you. So for that, I need to express my biggest gratitude to both of you. Nick, I've had the pleasure of meeting your dad at a couple of events. I joined one of his, then he joined one when I spoke. Met Nelson as well, good man. And I've been enjoying your cigars. They were a bit more new to me, but I have to say I'm in love with your 20th anniversary Maduro. That's as Nicaraguan and as beautiful as it gets. I really love that cigar. In the case of Drew State, I have to confess, it's probably one of my favorite cigars, and it's what has really allowed me to fall in love with it. I spent lots of time in events, but also on one-to-one calls with Jonathan. And really, he's quite a smart and astute man, if there's any in the industry. And it was very astute and very smart of him, obviously, to bring you on board into the family and bring in that Cuban element. Because it's interesting the way you describe the blending process, right? And we talked many times with Jonathan about that sort of, there's the priming and going more on a vertical way, and there's the horizontal blending. So it's that kind of axis that you fit between the different origins and the different parts of the plant that you work with. And you brought something that the first time a Cuban here in London really gave me a lesson on cigars. And the first thing she told me, good Magali, she works at Saltaire in London. Many of you would know here around the London cigar scene. So Magali tells me, Ricardo, the thing with Cuban cigars, we're really good at the aroma. You have to admit that. We have something special. The Nicaragua is almost there. So of course, it's very protective of her Cuban origins, but I think you brought a lot of that. And today, I've been loving my Liga Privada number 9, which is one of my favorite go-to cigars. And one thing I want to do and not forget to do, because I might have to ask my question, which is not as quick as you would like, Reinhard, so apologies for that. I'm talking with a Nicaraguan, I can't avoid it. So really, a good friend of ours, mutual friend, sent his regards. He couldn't be here with us today. A Scottish friend, Scott Vines from Tor Imports, who is responsible for bringing these beauties, and who I've been buying a lot of cigars from, more than I should. So his regards from Scott to you, Willy, and everybody else.
Thank you.
Something I'm curious about, because I've seen the evolution of cigar tastes, at least here in the micro ecosystem of the UK, and people's palates evolving, and more a tendency clearly of being more open to what, it's been theme as New World cigars, which I personally like it, nothing wrong with that. I embrace it and I love it. Have you both, in your experience, and you've been there for a while, have you noticed some kind of evolution in the palate of your clients, your customers, could it be brands or consumers? And has that evolution, if there's been any that you can detect, impacted, or has you adapted your own artistry, and which I think is absolutely magical what you're able to do? How has that impacted your cigar blending, that potential evolution of palates? And I will take advantage of a follow-up question to that, together with that evolution and have you adapted. What is now that you see as the most creative new things that you are trying, or you see other people trying? What's kind of the new novelties, if there's any, within cigar blending, new varieties, hybrids, what it is? So the question is to both, and gents, whoever feels in the mood to try to enlighten me a little bit and help me soak up some of your knowledge, if I may, please.
Well, Ricardo, I'll go first. I think the internet has played a big role in people developing their palate, because, back when I first started, there wasn't a lot of, people in the internet talking about cigars, rating cigars, reviewing cigars. I think you only had like one magazine or something like that that was really known for that. But now you have, people all over talking about the cigars that they're smoking, describing the cigars they're smoking, describing the factories where those cigars are from. And, they're creating fans. They're creating, these loyal consumers to all these individual companies, because the consumers, the people that are watching, whether it's, or listening to a podcast, or reading in a magazine, a review, or listening to somebody review a cigar online, their interest goes, oh, I've never heard of that. So they go out and they try it. And I think that's been a big part of people's palates changing and evolving and kind of getting refined. I remember early on, the trend was a cigar was never strong enough. It was never spicy enough. You needed more spice. You needed more strength. You needed more pepper. Now I'm seeing more people, they want more medium body, full flavor. They want cigars that are complex. They want cigars that they could smoke multiple a day, not one cigar and then have to go lay down because they just can't take another cigar. So people are evolving, their palates are evolving. They're looking for certain things in a cigar. They're just not puffing. And okay, that was a good cigar. No, why was it a good cigar? And a lot of people could tell you, well, I had the earthiness, or I had this creaminess, or I had this, this chocolatey taste, or red pepper and black pepper and white pepper and all different peppers. And people are like, they're just getting more knowledgeable because I think because of the internet, people are, the cigars are getting out there, and more people have access to hearing what different people are talking about in cigars. And so, when you're working on something new, you're looking at, okay, what are people talking about? What are people raving about? What's the buzz? Why is a certain cigar, the one that everybody's talking about? And you're like, okay, well, that's not my kind of cigar, but let's do something like this. And kind of, like I said earlier, plug a hole in your portfolio of what you have to offer, to have something out for that smoker, because obviously people are smoking it and you don't have it in your portfolio. So then you kind of start working on something having some of those characteristics. I mean, for me personally, like I said earlier, I'm huge on balance. So I'm never going to come up with this cigar that's going to blow your head off. But I'll give you something that has tons of flavor, and maybe that consumer or that smoker that's looking for that blow your head off will be happy with, oh my God, but it has so much flavor and so much complexity. Yeah, it didn't have this spice that, put my tongue on fire, but I really like the cigar. So, but definitely, I think the internet's been a big part of that.
Yeah, I agree with Willie, especially with the internet, especially, all the education that's out there, social media platforms, people sharing pictures of cigars, and people asking about the different type of blends. There's so much education out there, and I do see people looking for more full flavored cigars. Like how Willie said, it's similar with us. We're looking to make balanced, full flavored cigars. There's a difference between just pure strength, punching you in the face, and then flavor. And so for us, we want to provide, and what we see through the market especially in the last 15, 20 years, guys are looking for more flavor. Guys are looking for heavier type of cigars in terms of heavier type of flavors, not so much just pure brute strength. Guys are looking for that flavor. So as we continue to go along, and as we continue to make cigars, the biggest request overall is just more flavor, rich, deep Nicaraguan tobaccos, and that's what we're trying to provide for our customers.
Great. Well, thank you very much for both, and hopefully you can keep on delivering as you've been so far in that never-ending thirst for flavor. So thank you, and it's been a great honor and a pleasure.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you. I mean, as usual, we have nothing but thanks to everybody that's attending today, and of course, it goes without saying, our sincere thanks to our great two guests, Willy and Nick. Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you so much for the information. Thank you so much for your time. We can easily stay on this for another hour or two. I don't want to sound like I'm the one that wants to go to sleep, but I'm willing to stay up. but I mean, I guess all good things come to an end sometimes. Please do not forget that we have a lot of giveaways for you. We have cigar boxes from the members of CNT, and they are absolutely amazing. I've seen them, and I can tell you one thing: I'd love to get my hands on one of these boxes. Do follow us on Instagram, and do register online at mapworld.com, Puro Sabor 2021. Also, remember that there are 2 tickets up for grabs for the festival next year. And obviously those that are involved, those that follow us, and those that attend as many of the sessions as possible will have more of a chance of winning those. Once again, our dear attendees and guests, thank you so much for your time. Willy and Nick, all the best. Over to you, Reinhard.
Thank you. Very nice chatting with everyone. Willy, nice talking with you.
Likewise. Thank you, everyone.
Gentlemen, before we leave, let me also just briefly announce that, of course, we will be back with our Puro Sabor Virtual 2021 Festival in 2 weeks' time from today, where we'll be talking about the impact of the larger manufacturers in the Nicaraguan cigar industry. And we'll have an amazing array of guests waiting for you in 2 weeks from today. One final question before we wrap things off, and it's probably the question of questions of the entire show, and we could definitely, I believe, do an extra segment just on that. But Nick and Willy, share with us your perspective on what is a true master blender, and what separates a blender from the master.
I would have to say a guy who takes chances, a guy who is willing to get his hands dirty, willing to take these chances to really fulfill what the consumer wants. And to me, a master blender is a guy who has tremendous amounts of patience, somebody who is willing to put in the time, dirty up his hands, and really just take tobacco and stretch it as far as possible in terms of how to make blends, in terms of satisfying the customer. And that's my opinion. Just being patient and just working the tobacco as best as you possibly can. I think a blender and a master blender, I think overall, and on behalf of with our company, I think our circle of people that we have. I truly believe at this point, after almost over 25 years of being in Nicaragua, I think our guys who are they are master blenders. They're just not blenders. I think they are master blenders.
Well, I think it's a multiple answer. You have to, like Nick said, you gotta know, you gotta have that patience. You gotta be willing to think outside the box. You gotta be willing to maybe come out of your comfort zone and work on things that maybe you typically wouldn't work on. But a step further, you gotta know the tobacco. You gotta know where that tobacco is being grown. You gotta know the characteristics of all those different tobaccos, not only region by region, but from the individual growers or suppliers of tobacco, where those farms are located. And you get to a point where you learn the profile of those individual tobaccos from those individual farms. And I think, you have to have all of those parts as part of what you're doing, because you could have a person just go in and say, okay, no, I want you to make a cigar for me, but I want you to put this, this, and this. But it's kind of just throwing something in the wall and see if it sticks, right? When you're knowing what tobaccos you're gonna go for, you have this idea. Okay, we're gonna come up with this cigar, and then when you were able to say, okay, let's go to this bale, let's grab this bale, let's get this one from this farm, this one from this region, and pretty much how they're all going to work together in the fillers, in the binder, in the wrapper. Is it going to give you the flavor you're looking for? Is it going to give you that aroma you're looking for? Is it going to give you that balance that you're looking for? I think that's where you could say, all right, no, you know what you're doing. Whether or not you're a master blender or not, you know all these components. What is needed to achieve that cigar, which at the end of the day, that's the goal, is to make that cigar taste a certain way. Like I said earlier, man, you're grabbing rolled up dried leaves. You're grabbing dried up leaves and rolling it up into something that's gonna smoke and taste magical, and is gonna either make your worst day a better day or make a great day an amazing day. And that's the power of cigars, whether it's a celebratory thing because you got a promotion, or because you got married, or you had a child born, whatever it is. I've met so many people that a cigar has made a moment memorable. And it's been in both extremes. It's been to the point where I'll never forget, I was doing an event at a store, and the gentleman I was speaking with, was introduced to cigars. In particular, it was one of our cigars by his son. Well, his son went off he was in the military, and, they had a routine. Every night they would smoke a cigar in a certain, in a certain area of the house, and they would smoke their cigar together, and they would talk about their day. And when I still get chills, when the son never came back from war, that cigar is what reminded him and took him to that place every single day. Now his son was no longer there, but he had that cigar that he would enjoy with his son every day. And that's the power of a cigar, man. Makes a bad moment better. It gives you, some sort of comfort. Or if you got married or you got a promotion or whatever it is, and you're celebrating with a cigar, it makes it that much better. And, at the end of the day, man, it's incredible like I always say, what rolled up dried leaves do. And that's what I love about it. It's just an amazing thing.
Amen.
That's a mic drop right there. What better way? And another epic broadcast, well over 2 hours. NicholasPerdomo III, Willy Herrera, Riot, the entire Chamber of Tobacco of Nicaragua, and all our dear sisters and brothers of the leaf out there. Thank you from the deepest of hearts. We'll see you again here either on Wednesday for a traditional Light 'em Up show, or in 2 weeks' time from now for the next Puro Sabor virtual festival. Until then, you be safe, be healthy, and light 'em up. Goodbye.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Willie.
Yes.
Appreciate it.